mentioned earlier, the diversity teaching group, this is the Scottish Government looking at how do we diversify our workforce. But the argument I always bring is we need to look at how our current teachers of colour exist in the workforce, because they talk about the racism they experience, sometimes from the young people, but believe it or not, mostly from their fellow colleagues. Yeah, so we need to think about that in all the actions that we do, so that communication, that collaboration with all our colleagues is really important. And just to come to the finish there, as you can hear, my timer went off, so I'm just a couple of minutes over time, and I'll just finish off shortly. Folks, what I'm asking you to do is a really difficult task. And Nado Aveling is a white academic in the States, and she says that when we ask our white teachers, our white students to interrogate their own racialized, gendered and class-based positioning, it's a difficult task. And it's almost akin to hacking at our very roots. So I understand that the discomfort will be there, the vulnerability will be there, but it's perhaps nowhere in the scale of what young people are experiencing when they experience a racist incident. So just spare that moment. So please begin to examine how whiteness functions within our school policies. Do we have a race statement in our schools, or we're relying on the local authority policy? Do we have a bilingual learners statement in our school? How can we begin to develop those partnerships with our parents? Walk the talk. Develop that anti-racist consciousness through listening to the counter-narratives. And those counter-narratives are around listening to what our young people are telling us. How about getting them to team teach? They come with cultural wealth. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Learn from our young people what it's like to be, from a different cultural background or a different faith background, I remember once my daughter saying to my teacher, said, we celebrate Christmas because that celebrates Jesus' birthday. Muslims celebrate Eid because it's Prophet Muhammad's birthday. And my daughter put her hand on her hip and said, "Sure, Mum, that was wrong." I said, "That's wrong. Did you tell your teacher that?" And she says, "Oh, you try telling her." And so that's our young people saying that she didn't feel comfortable telling her teacher, "You've got that wrong, by the way." But actually, it was a missed opportunity as a teacher, thinking about the young people in your class. How do we involve them in planning with our lessons and so on? So folks, let's move beyond that discomfort. Let's move beyond that guilt and start to think about what it means to become an effective white ally. And just very quickly, Daryl Ringslow's quote here talks about allies are individuals who belong to that dominant social group. So actually what you can use is your power and privilege to be able to work and support with your colleagues of colour, with the young people that you are supporting, in order to challenge and address prejudicial practices within our workplaces. So this pedagogy of justice is so important. Create those safe spaces, make explicit the added value that our young people bring and your fellow colleagues of colour. And that calling in, because calling out sometimes can be seen as somebody being quite, often aggressive, but actually saying, well, do you know what you've just said there is inappropriate? Let's have a chat about that. And I'm going to end there because I think it's really important. I want to create space just to get some observations and comments from yourself. Maybe something for you to think about. What have your experiences been in and around race equality? Are those conversations taking place within schools that you have been visiting as student teachers? And I will stop sharing there, Stephen, and just to finish off, I think just to put it into context, I'm going to read you out just a very short quote about how important it is for us to get our young people's names correct, particularly if they come from a diverse cultural background. Let's not make it up. Let's not call them something else. It's so important because it's a marker of their identity. So when we chose our daughters' names, we wanted to give them something that they could carry with them, something that they could use as strength, as home, in a world that might not always nurture them as we would want it to. We gave them names that were hundreds of years old, that carried with them the prayers of their great-grandmothers, names that represented their own spirits, but that also manifested the spirit of their people. We gave them names that we knew would be a challenge at times, and that might even feel like a burden when they just want to blend in. But we needed them to know that they come from somewhere and that this is their strength, their power, and the representation of our own hope for their futures and for those of the children they will someday have. And I'll stop there, Stephen.